This video is brought to you by my supporters on Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, and YouTube. If you'd like to support me, you can find the links below. Abhijit Chavda. If I had a penny for every time I'd gotten a request to debunk this man, I wouldn't need that support message at the beginning of the video. Because, money runs the world. One of the most popular requests I've gotten is to debunk this man. And I've kind of been refraining from making that video because most of what he speaks about is history. And that's not a field in which I have any expertise, nor is it the theme of this channel. But recently he went on a podcast called RealHit and spoke a lot of science. Now that is the theme of this channel. So let's analyze that. And some of what he says in that podcast is problematic, to say the least. Also, I must say here that nowhere in this video am I going to be disrespectful towards him or the guys at RealHit. Okay, maybe except for that last joke. Because my intention is not to start drama of any kind, but to genuinely look at the comments he made during that podcast. Hi, my name's Pranav. You're watching Science is Dope. Let's begin. For those of you that are new to this channel, the theme of this channel is based around science and rationality. My background is in teaching science and I've spent a couple of years developing science content before starting this channel. When someone sent me this video, initially going into it, I expected Abhijit to misrepresent science a lot, because I've seen him do that with history. In fact, he seems to have a reputation for doing that, for holding a lot of positions outside of consensus. I expected him to do something similar here, but he didn't, and I appreciate that. Given the kind of questions he was asked,
उस जमाने में इतनी मशीनरी नहीं थी कि परफेक्टली ऐसे पिरामिड्स बन पाए, ये कैसे बने, क्यों बने, तो इसके पीछे आपने रिसर्च करी है, क्या है, क्या ये एलियंस ने बनाए हैं? सर, आप मानते हो एलियंस में?
Not only did he represent science well, but he both encouraged evidence-based thinking.
Sir, I really want to know this thing. आपने इस बारे में पढ़ा डार्क साइड ऑफ मून?
हाँ,
है ना, उधर कहते हैं कि एलियंस अभी भी एग्जिस्ट करते हैं.
अच्छा, प्रमाण है?
And also saying, I don't know when there isn't enough evidence to draw a conclusion.
मेरे पास और कोई आंसर नहीं है इस समय. Without evidence मैं आपको कुछ जवाब नहीं दे सकता.
Instead of filling those gaps in knowledge with whatever beliefs or conspiracy theories the questioner may have.
US गवर्नमेंट के पास एक एलियन ट्रैप्ड है.
एरिया 51 की
एरिया 51 पे उधर वहाँ पे एलियंस आए थे एक बार.
There were, however, places where I felt what he said may show some double standards and that might create problems. And one instance of an actual conspiracy theory that he mentioned as something genuinely true.
इलेक्ट्रिसिटी का भी डिस्कवरी हमने किया है.
But I'll get into that as the video progresses. First, I thought I should cover a bit on what I mentioned in the beginning, because I know I'm gonna get at least one hate comment regarding that. So what did I mean by he holds positions outside of consensus? When a majority of experts agree on a certain idea on the basis of conclusions from available evidence and it becomes accepted in the field, we say we have consensus. In history, we have a consensus regarding the migration of people into India thousands of years ago. If you are holding a position or an opinion opposite to that, then you're far more likely to be wrong than you are to be right. And some of Abhijit Chavda's opinions are outright conspiracy theories, like the out of India theory, not accepted by academia. Of course, there is a tiny chance that when you hold such positions, you are right and the consensus is wrong. But resting all your hopes on this tiny, unlikely chance is just wishful thinking. I'm starting to feel like I shouldn't have said that last sentence, because I can feel some idiot is gonna take that sentence out of context and make a video titled "Science is Dope exposes himself, says it's possible that people came out of India." If you make that video, the only thing you're exposing is how much of an idiot you are. Now, I'm not a historian. I don't know more about history than the people who study and work on it for a living. So I'm gonna go with their opinion, what they agree upon, which is the current consensus. Abhijit Chavda is a history enthusiast. He's an amateur historian, not a professional. And correct me if I'm wrong. So not siding with the consensus is an unreasonable position for him too. And I'm gonna spell this out again for the idiots planning to make a video on me, because I know you're gonna make the same mistake that people like Beer Biceps makes, or people in this RealHit podcast makes. There's no authority in science or history or any empirical field of study for that matter. There are only experts. And if you're talking to an expert on your podcast, say, their only job is to come there and tell you what the current consensus is, not to tell you what their new groundbreaking idea is. Like an authority figure. If you're trying to convince a bunch of gullible podcasters and their million-plus audience of your conspiracy theories, why don't you show us their actually legitimate theories by convincing experts first? Oh wait, what's that? I think I hear someone strawmanning me again in their new exposed video. Pranav says don't listen to experts. I'm saying experts are not authorities. But hey, if you need to lie in your videos to get some views, I'm not gonna stop you. Alright, without further ado, let's watch what he said in the podcast. Now, before I get to it, I must say he did a fairly good job. At least on the science topics, I didn't hear any conspiracies except this one.
इलेक्ट्रिसिटी का भी डिस्कवरी हमने किया है.
Let's watch the actual podcast. And it goes without saying that I'm not going to be able to play the entire podcast here. I'm only going to play sections of it. And I will do my best to interpret him as fairly as possible and not take him out of context anywhere. But if you feel I did, then you can check out the original podcast. I would urge the creators not to copyright strike this video as it's legally protected under fair use.
आज हमारे साथ एक ऐसे शख्स हैं जिनके पास नॉलेज का भंडार है.
I'm gonna repeat this. Having a lot of knowledge on a subject or being an expert is not a substitute for evidence, or in this case, consensus. Now, I'm gonna take a look at the science and rationality ideas he talks about in the podcast.
एक बात पूछनी है आपको. इजिप्शियन हिस्ट्री बहुत पुरानी हिस्ट्री रही है. वहाँ पे पिरामिड्स और कुछ ऐसी मिस्टीरियस चीज़ें भी रही हैं शुरुआत से, जिसे कहा जाता है कि उस ज़माने में इतनी मशीनरी नहीं थी कि परफेक्टली ऐसे पिरामिड्स बन पाए. ये कैसे बने, क्यों बने, तो इसके पीछे आपने रिसर्च करी है? क्या है, क्या ये एलियंस ने बनाए हैं?
Without wasting any time, they get right into conspiracy land. If we can't figure out how the pyramids were built, there's only one solution. Aliens did it. Let's see how Chavda responds.
आज के अगर हम टेक्नोलॉजी देखें, क्रेन से हमारे पास मशीन से, हमारे पास ऐसा कोई मशीन नहीं है जो इतना ऊपर इतना बड़ा स्टोन वहाँ तक पहुँचा पाए. और ये हज़ारों वर्ष पहले इन्होंने ये काम किया. कैसे किया हम जानते नहीं है. अगर कोई बड़ी बड़ी मशीन यूज़ की, वो मशीन कहाँ है? इतनी बड़ी मशीन तो कहीं ना कहीं उसका कुछ ना कुछ तो आपको एविडेंस मिलना चाहिए. कुछ टूटा फूटा वो नहीं है. अगर उन्होंने एक रैंप बनाया उस वहाँ तक चढ़ाने के लिए, तो वो रैंप के अवशेष कहाँ है? तो इसलिए लोग पूछते हैं कि क्या एलियंस थे इसमें कि एलियंस ने कुछ एलियन टेक्नोलॉजी से ये पत्थर वहाँ पर असेंबल किए. तो ये आज भी किसी के पास जवाब नहीं. आप किसी भी हिस्टोरियन के पास जाओ तो वो बोलेंगे कि शायद ये हुआ होगा या शायद वो हुआ होगा, लेकिन उसका कोई एविडेंस नहीं है.
So far, great start. He says more.
वैसे सर आपको क्या लगता है कि एग्जैक्टली क्या हुआ होगा?
मुझे लगता है शायद भगवान ने किया या फिर शायद एलियंस ने किया. विदाउट एविडेंस में आपको कुछ जवाब नहीं दे सकता.
A perfectly reasonable response, and I couldn't be happier with it. This is a podcast full of young 20-something guys who fall for any conspiracy theory thrown at them, and I'm sure their audience is never exposed to a rational source for any of these answers. And I'm so glad he's giving it to them.
सर आप मानते हो एलियंस में?
No conspiracy theory podcast is complete without this important question.
आपने कभी एलियंस को देखा है? कैसा था एक्सपीरियंस?
Now, as a question, this is a perfectly valid one, and there are many ways of answering it. There's only one rational way, and that's what we get from Abhijit Chavda.
पूरे विश्व में 10⁻22 स्टार्स है. तो इतने स्टार्स है तो वहाँ कहीं पर एक जगह पर भी और लाइफ नहीं होगी क्या हमारे जैसी? लेकिन हमारे पास आज तक उसका एविडेंस मिला नहीं है. तो फिर प्रश्न ये उठता है कि कहाँ हैं सब लोग, क्यों छुपे हुए हैं? तो इसका हमारे पास जवाब नहीं है.
Very rational answer. I'm so happy with how the podcast is going so far. And we see the same theme of a conspiracy theory being raised to him and him answering it very rationally.
सर हम ही तो नहीं है एलियंस.
ये पॉसिबिलिटी है, लेकिन उसका एविडेंस हमें मिलना चाहिए, है ना. हर चीज़ एविडेंस के हिसाब से होती है. साइंटिफिक मेथड में क्या है कि वी नीड ऑब्जर्वेशनल एविडेंस.
वेद बात करते हैं कि टाइम स्पेरिकल है और साइक्लिक है और मतलब साइंस कहता है टाइम लीनियर है. तो आपका क्या पर्सनली इस पे क्या टेक है?
एक्सपीरियंस तो मेरा लीनियर टाइम का ही है. मैंने कभी टाइम को ऐसे घूमते हुए देखा नहीं है.
जो तपस्या करते थे, साधु होते थे, ऋषि मुनि थे, क्या हम उन्हें साइंटिस्ट कह सकते हैं? नहीं कह सकते.
क्यों? वो क्या करते थे? वो यूनिवर्स का एक्सप्लोरेशन करते थे. लेकिन कौन सा यूनिवर्स? इनर यूनिवर्स. इनर यूनिवर्स का एक्सप्लोरेशन आप कैसे करते हो? थ्रू इंटरनल एक्सपीरियंसेस. उनको आप क्वांटिफाई नहीं कर सकते, उनको आप मेजर नहीं कर सकते, लेकिन उसका आप कोई प्रूफ या प्रमाण नहीं दे सकते.
बट सर जैसे ये चीजें भूगोल की अर्थ गोल है, उन्हें पता
ये
था,
साइंस है.
अब कुछ तो रीजन होगा कि वो ये चीज कह रहे हैं.
And here I have to say two things. That last sentence you heard is a logical fallacy that you hear often. It's called an appeal to ignorance. You're appealing to your ignorance of what's actually happening. When you say there must be some reason behind this, I don't know what it is, but there must be some reason. That is a logical fallacy. And two, I think culturally, people in India have been very prone to mystics, the sage-like characters who are mostly dressed in orange or white. And trust me, if they're trying to grow a large audience, they're probably scamming each and every one of them. And they've put an image in our heads that a person can be very knowledgeable by just sitting and meditating.
He sat there with his eyes closed and saw that if you go deep enough into this, there is an evolutionary memory in this.
Empirical knowledge comes only from observational evidence. Knowledge about evolution or the earth being spherical, etc. are empirical, and they cannot be gained by just sitting there and meditating, no matter what a godman says.
कुछ ऋषि साइंस, एक्चुअल साइंस करते थे, हार्ड साइंस. ऋषि कन्नड़ जो थे, कन्नड़, he was the propounder of the first atomic or quantum theory.
Whoa. Here we get into some shaky grounds. Rishi Kannad is known to have come up with an idea of the atom. I don't know what quantum he's talking about. There was no such thing in the idea he proposed. And I'm sure that idea of Anu, the smallest indivisible particle that he came up with, is a philosophical idea. There was no hard science in it. There was no experimental or observational evidence. The first experiments we actually did on the atom around 1900 required so much power. The neutron, a fundamental particle in the atom, was so elusive that it wasn't discovered in the 1930s. Now, is it possible that Rishi Kannad made experimental observations before he came up with this theory? Sure, but it's extremely unlikely. It's like saying it's possible that a unicorn exists, but nobody's ever seen one. Also, there's some degree of visual thinking on the part of people who believe these unlikely possibilities because they wish it to be true that the atomic theory was developed in India first. And they want it to be true so bad that they're willing to let go of all reason and rationality. Let's keep going.
So ऐसे बहुत थे हमारे साइंटिस्ट. हमारे ब्रह्मगुप्त थे, आर्यभट्ट थे, बहुत सारे ऐसे साइंटिस्ट हैं जिन्होंने एक्चुअल साइंटिफिक रिसर्च किया है.
Aryabhatta, Brahmagupta, etc. were genuine mathematicians, astronomers, and scientists. I made videos on them all. You can check them out. And by the way, you know how we know all this about them? Because we have evidence.
इलेक्ट्रिसिटी का भी डिस्कवरी हमने किया है, और फिर कुछ केमिकल इलेक्ट्रोप्लेटिंग एंड ऑल दैट स्टफ.
Oof, here's the conspiracy theory. Just when it was going all so well, he brings up electricity. Okay, now I think many cultures all over the world knew about static electricity long back. But there's this very popular conspiracy theory that originated around the 1900s that this ancient book from India called the Agastya Samhita talks about how to build a working Daniel cell. There's no historical consensus from actual experts on this. The only places where you'll find this idea are in random nationalist blogs on Medium and conspiracy theory Instagram pages and reels like these.
जब नागपुर कॉलेज के संस्कृत डिपार्टमेंट के हेड डॉक्टर साहस बुद्धे अगस्त्य संहिता पढ़ रहे थे तो उन्हें लगा कि उसमें वर्णित एक श्लोक डैनियल सेल को बनाने की प्रक्रिया से मेल खाती है।
अगस्त्य संहिता इंडिया का एक इतना एंशिएंट टेक्स्ट जिसमें ड्राई बैटरी बनाने का तरीका दिया हुआ है जिससे बिजली बन सकती थी।
See, here's why I think this is an outright fake claim. The discovery was made around the early 1900s when a lot of fake claims from Sanskrit scriptures started coming out. Like Vedic maths or Vaimanika Shastra, the aircraft technology book, all of which claimed their origins were from very ancient times. But they were all written in very modern Sanskrit without any discussions on the fundamentals of the subject, be it basic math and Vedic maths or the basic idea of how planes fly in Vaimanika Shastra. They get right into very advanced ideas like doing very complex operations in math or like the uniform and the diet of pilots and passengers of the aircraft. Now, I've done videos on both these ideas in the past. I'll link them in a card up here and in the description below. Now, let's come to the electricity claims from Agastya Samhita. This is the verse which is being claimed as the Daniel cell construction verse. I got this verse translated by my friend and it has all the same flaws I mentioned earlier. It claims to be very ancient but has very modern Sanskrit. It doesn't discuss any fundamentals like what is electricity and what are these chemical cells like the Daniel cell, or what are its applications. Like, okay, you invented this thing, now what are you going to use it for? And you know what? All of these texts were discovered after this technology was already available in the world. It sounds to me like someone made it up, translated the ideas from English to Sanskrit and claimed these ideas were from ancient India, knowing full well that these couldn't be verified. And today we have all these conspiracies. Unfortunately, I can't prove it's fake, but for all the reasons I mentioned, it's very unlikely to be real. If you disagree with me, प्लीज लेट मी नो व्हाई इन द कमेंट्स।
हमारे जो पूर्वज थे इन्होंने इतने हज़ारों वर्ष तक इतने सारे महान काम किए और ये इतना पुराना कल्चर, इतना रिच कल्चर सिविलाइजेशन बनाया। We have to respect that. I have the highest respect for that.
Respect is great, but it's when respect crosses over into wishful thinking that it becomes a problem. That's when people start compromising on their reason and rationality. And that's when people become vulnerable to scams. And people start fooling them because they are strong believers in these ideas. Anyway, after this point, the talk gets more rational.
कुछ नेगेटिव एनर्जी का भी आपने एक्सपीरियंस नहीं करा? सम बैड एनर्जी मतलब?
नहीं, नॉट रियली। कोई सुपरनैचुरल ऐसा मैंने कोई अपने आंखों से दिखा नहीं कभी, नेवर।
तो आपका ये है प्रत्यक्ष प्रमाण वाली आइडियोलॉजी में आप बिलीव करते हो, जो दिखेगा उसे ही मैं मानूंगा।
दिस इज नॉट आइडियोलॉजी, दिस इज द साइंटिफिक मेथड।
देयर आर एविडेंसेस कि पीपल हैव टाइम ट्रैवल्ड इन पास्ट।
देयर आर क्लेम्स।
आपने इस बारे में पढ़ा डार्क साइड ऑफ मून?
हाँ,
है ना, उधर कहते हैं कि एलियंस अभी भी एग्जिस्ट करते हैं।
अच्छा, प्रमाण है?
That's mostly it for the rest of the podcast. They also discuss UFOs and aliens in secret military bases in the US, which Chavda handles rashly, like what I've shown you so far. But I also wanted to highlight one part of the conversation.
Universe का 95% हमें पता नहीं है. So maybe there could be something out there. I am hopeful that there is a good force, good energy, whatever जो भी आप कहेंगे, a good thing. मे बी ब्रह्मा जी है या फिर ब्रह्मा जी से भी बड़ा कुछ है, पॉसिबली इट इज़ पॉसिबल, आई डोंट नो, आई हैव नेवर सीन एनी एविडेंस। मुझे अपने फ्रॉम माई परस्पेक्टिव मैंने आज तक ऐसा कोई भी ऐसा एक्सपीरियंस नहीं किया है जिससे मुझे कोई एविडेंस मिले, एक्सपीरियंशियल एविडेंस ऑफ गॉड और द सुपरनैचुरल, बट आई एम होपफुल कि कुछ अच्छा होगा आउट देयर। I'm hopeful.
What I don't understand is why or how he's hopeful for God when he has this very neutral attitude towards aliens. The evidence for both is equally poor and just as poor as that for dragons or unicorns or even ghosts. If I was positive towards any of these theories, I'd be positive towards the idea of aliens, life on other planets. because we understand the biology of carbon and water-based life, and those are made of some of the most abundant elements in the universe, and we've seen the conditions that give rise to life. So again, I'd be most hopeful towards finding aliens, not something supernatural, and I can't help but feeling that this hopefulness stems from his bias towards his culture, and the same bias is what leads to his nationalistic conspiracy theories. Anyway, I'd give his podcast appearance a rating of 7 out of 10 because he was fairly rational throughout, and he's reaching an audience that might never watch more rational videos like ever. So, great job. And I've deducted points for the conspiracy theories and his double standard viewpoints that I mentioned. Now, we all want to hear great things about the land we were born in and the people that were here before us. There is some genuine things that we should be proud about. But when we start giving heed to people lying and inventing things to be proud about, not only are we stealing that glory away from the genuinely great things, we are also destroying our own capability to think rationally about things. And that's something this country needs desperately. I'll just ask you to remember, sure, be proud of your ancestors and traditions, but not at the expense of your reason and rationality. If you like my work, feel free to support me on Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, UPI, YouTube, thanks and memberships, merch and website. All these options are linked down below. If you support me on Patreon or YouTube, you get perks like these wonderful people. Your name might be displayed in the video, or the videos might be available early. You get perks which I've described over there, so check them out. I try to do all my videos without brand sponsorships. If you like this video, you might like this one where I analyzed the conspiracy theory of Vimanas or ancient aircrafts. I'll see you in the next one. Till then, remember, science is dope.